What is up and welcome back to my channel. As you guys can tell from the title of today's video, I'm going to be talking to you guys about all my favorite books of 2018. I keep wanting to say 2019. We're not even in January yet and I'm already messing that up. Does anybody else screw up the dates for like the first 2 months of the year? No, just me? Okay. But I want to talk to you guys about all the books that I read in 2018 that I truly loved. Books that I would go back to, books that I recommended, books that I've just gushed about on my channel. None of these are going to be in any particular order, except I'm going to be saving my absolute favorite for last, which probably won't be much of a surprise to you guys. The first one that I read that I really loved was The Wolf and the Whale. As you guys know, I will leave the video up above that you guys can check out my review on it. I have reviews for all of these on Goodreads as well, or maybe most of them. I think I have all of them though. But I loved this book. This book is about a girl named Omat. She is a girl boy. She's raised as a boy in her culture. But the thing that I really like about this book, other than her struggle with figuring out who she truly is just the clash of gods. There are Norse gods, there are Alaskan gods. It was just done so well. I actually sent my arc to a friend and she loved it just as much as I did. It is very heart-wrenching. It is very much so, I feel like, how the world would really be. There is a couple of animal deaths in this, obviously, because that is their culture. They do hunt, they do fish, that kind of thing. But this book just really touched me. I bawled my eyes out. There is a trigger warning for rape in this though, if you are kind of hesitant about reading books like that, just be forewarned. It is not done in much detail, but you do kind of get a sense of that is what is happening. But this book blew me away. I remember just seeing the arc request for it and being like, well, it's about Alaska. It's got the gods in it. Maybe I'll check it out. But it was so much more than I thought it was. And if you are interested, I believe it comes out this month. I think it comes out, it comes out January 14th, I want to say. I'll leave the information down below for the Goodreads page so you guys can find it. But I have already pre-ordered a copy and I cannot wait for it to get here. The next book that I want to talk about is The Dry by Jane Harper. I have talked about this book a few times on my channel. I recently got into thrillers this year. It was a new discovery for me. Not necessarily something that I was thinking I would particularly love, but I randomly requested this book because it was available from my library. I actually listened to it on audiobook. It's the book that got me into audiobooks, and I think it's phenomenal. It is not a full cast, it is just one person, but it's told from a male perspective. It is Aaron Falk is the main character of the story, but it is essentially, he has moved away from a small town him and his dad did when they were much younger because him and his best friend and his dad are all accused of killing one of their friends, a kind of love interest to one of the boys. But what brings him back to his town is the boy in question, his old best friend, is actually accused of murdering himself, his son, and his wife. Just a full-on massacre. And he is brought back for the funeral and his parents kind of ask him to help figure out if he did it. They don't believe he could do it, that kind of thing. And they kind of tie into the murder mystery of the first part of the book, the thing that made them kind of run away. This book blew my mind, absolutely blew my mind. I loved it so much. I inhaled this book. It was one of those books where I pull up at home after work and I wouldn't want to get out of the car because I want to finish the chapter on audiobook, and I was carrying it around with me, listening to it at work. It was just stunning, and I would definitely recommend it if you are into thrillers. The next book I read is I Hear the Sunspot, which is actually a manga. This is about two boys, one of which is deaf, and that's really what the story kind of revolves around in a way. There's a bit of a male-male love interest between the two of them, but what I really liked about this book is kind of how wholesome it was in a way. There's a gay romance going on and they're kind of trying to discover themselves, but what I really liked is actually the deaf rep in this book. I think it was done very well. Obviously, I am not deaf, but I have heard from people that they felt like it was represented very well. And in the later volumes of this series, it goes into much more depth. One of the boys actually starts working with a company and he says, other than subtitles, we need to actually start branching out and doing more for the deaf community because there are levels of deaf, obviously. Some people can not hear at all. Some people had hearing when they were younger and then lost hearing, which is one of our main characters. That's actually the kind of level of deaf that he is. He can sort of hear things, but it's very, very muffled, and he worries throughout this series about losing more hearing. So I feel like there are layers to this that aren't represented in most cases of deaf rep. This is not the first deaf rep book I've read, but I think it is the best one so far that I have read. And if you're interested in that, I would definitely pick it up. The next book that I read is Only Human by Sylvain Neuvel. This is the third book in a series, so I'm not gonna linger here for too long, but this book I feel like was very different from the first ones. The first one is more about it's written in a very different way. It is written in interviews, emails, that kind of thing. And I feel like the format kind of turned people off a lot, but the further along you get into the series, especially with Only Human, I feel like the writing style changes a lot. It's more of a story just being told. There's still dialogue that is still represented, but it's done in a very different way. But the thing that I can really hone in on without giving away too much of the series, because talking about what I really loved about this book will give away the rest of it. But what I really liked about this book that stands out to me that I think a lot of people will enjoy if they, you know, do read the series is the life lessons. I highlighted like 3/4 of this book. There are so many quotes and so many beautiful things from this book that I feel like can be applied to us as humans. It's a lot about making mistakes and forgiveness and moving on as like a species. And I think that it was just what I needed at the time when I read it. And I have yet to meet a single person who has read this series that hasn't absolutely loved it. So if you are interested, like I said, Goodreads down below. I would highly recommend this entire series, but specifically to get to Only Human, because it's less about story and more about people and emotions and who we truly are. The next book I read, well, books that I read that I wanted to talk about here would be The Woods. This is a comic book series. I am on volume 8 or 9. There is one more volume, but this series really blew me away. This series is about, without giving too much away, a school that is kind of transported to a different planet, and they live on this planet and they're meeting new people, you know, people who were transported before them, and they're trying to make a life for themselves, but the world itself that they live on has a crazy power within it. I'm trying not to give too much away, honestly. The series is just really good. It gives me the Walking Dead vibes. There are no zombies, but the power struggles that people have, I really enjoyed. The connections that the characters have, I really enjoyed. And the thing that I loved about it so much is how realistic it is to what would truly happen if we were just transported to another planet. The art style does kind of bug me a little bit. It is kind of back and forth between being slightly choppy and then just really, really colorful and beautiful, but I still really loved it. I loved the story so much that I could see past that, and if you've been following me for a while, you know art style in comics is a really big deterrent for me, so if it's not done very well, I will just quit reading a comic book. I can't look at a comic book and it looked like crap. Not saying this one did, but the art style did bug me at points, and I still kept reading because I was so interested. I read almost the entire series in about a week. That's how much I loved it. The next book I have here is A Long Way to a Small Angry Planet. This is a book that G, who's one of my very, very best friends, I will link her channel down below, she recommended it to me, and it took me a very long time to read it. I read it at the beginning of the year, but essentially what the series follows is a girl is kind of running, a woman is running from her past, and she gets to become a clerk on this ship, and the ship is a bit of a transport ship, bit of a smuggling kind of ship. But what I really liked about this book is the representation for different aliens, different species, and the lot of the character building. If you are into character building, you will inhale this book. Like, it is beautiful. The subsequent 2 books are told from different perspectives, so you could theoretically read them out of order, although I would not recommend doing that, but you could. So if one of them really sparks your interest, then I think you'd really like it. But there are different aliens represented in here. There are different sexualities and genders and gender neutrality and just so much. And I feel like Becky Chambers did an amazing job representing people without putting like that kind of name on it, because like I said, a lot of them are aliens. Like Syssix is basically an Argonian from Elder Scrolls. Like, I loved this series so much. I loved the characters. I love all of them. And I really enjoy that the ending kind of wrapped things up for other characters, and the other 2 books are going to carry on with characters that maybe didn't get a whole lot of time in the limelight. You get to learn a little bit more about them. And I've heard the second one is very different when it comes to story, in the sense of it is more about story and less about characters. But I feel like I said, because you can read them out of order and you can really read them whenever you want to, or choose not to read the other 2, I feel like A Long Way to a Small Angry Planet really stands out as a book that, if you like characters, if you want that kind of story, you can read it without feeling tied down to reading the other 2, because they are very different. The next book that I want to talk about is Starfish. I read Starfish very early on in the year. It is about a girl who wants to get to art school. She wants to go to art school and she is unable to make it. She doesn't get in. So she decides to go with a long lost love that moves back to town, where he's back for like a vacation or something, and she goes with him to California and she really discovers herself. This is an Asian American represented book. This is about a girl whose mom is very white, really awful. Like, I hate her mom, but it is more about like finding yourself and figuring out where you fit, and she meets another Asian family in California that really sparks the heart of her as an Asian American, and I loved it, and I cried, and the love story is adorable, and there's an art element in it that I absolutely loved. It's just a phenomenal book. I cannot wait to get to, I think it's called Bluebird. I think it's on my wish list and my TBR, so that I can keep track of what I want to read. But I just am blown away by Akimi's writing. It's also just done, like, it's written very well. It's written in a way that is like it flows really well, and there's not a whole lot being bogged down. There's not a whole lot of like crazy poetic, you know, writing like Maggie Stiefvater, like that kind of stuff. Like it's just done, it makes you imagine things, and it's so beautiful, like you're really picturing it in your head, but it's written in a way that it doesn't bog down the story. I just really, really liked it, and I would recommend it. The next book that I read I have to talk about would be Kings of the Wild. This is next on my list. I love Kings of the Wild. I love Nicholas. I'm obsessed. I have let my friends borrow this book. I've shoved the second one immediately in their hands, like prepared, like with the book, like take the second one, you need to read it now. Very different from the first one, but Kings of the Wild, I loved. It blew me away. Bloody Rose as well, I could include in this, but they're very different books, and I think I liked Kings just a tiny bit more. Kings of the Wild is about a group of older mercenary men who've tried to kind of give up the merc business. They just want to like settle down and kind of calm down everything, but they are unable to because Golden Gabe, the like lead in the band, it's really funny because it's also based sort of on music, which I actually really liked. He comes to Clay, our main character's home, and says, my daughter Rose has been under siege in this castle. We need to go and save her. We need to get the band back together. And that's really what the book follows. The book ends with them getting to the castle, so it's their journey there. The characters are so fleshed out and wonderful, and I cried so much. I cried from sheer terror in this book, like being afraid for like my babies, essentially like my old grandpa babies, but as well as I cried laughing. Oh my God. You meet an author, meet in the sense of like discover their works, and when you find out like they're funny, like reading a book where you truly laugh out loud has only happened to me twice this year. And this is one of the books. I think like for humor, it's beautiful. For the story, it's beautiful. For the characters, it's beautiful. All around, this book blew me away this year. This is like one of the top 5 books that I read this year. I loved it. I think that just the world building itself is sort of missing, but kind of not in this book. It sort of takes a back seat. So if you're really into world building, you might miss that a little bit, but I feel like every other aspect of this book makes up for it in leaps and bounds. Like it really focuses on what needs to be focused on. And I also feel like he really did his research, Nicholas did, with the fighting scenes. There's a lot of fight scenes in this book, and I really liked that. And oftentimes I will read action books, like books that have a lot of like action in them, and I'll get a little bit lost because the action doesn't flow in my head like it should. But in this, I did not struggle at all. So Kings of the Wild, guys, you have to get on it. I've seen it everywhere. Like he deserves all the awards for this book. He is a newcomer to the scene, I feel like, for fantasy. Like he brought something new to the genre that was missing. I truly, truly believe that. I just loved this book. Like 10 out of 10. Like you need to read it like right now. So the next book I want to talk about is actually Sakyo Girls. I love Sakyo Girls way more than I thought I was going to. I'd heard some things about it, and I did a few buddy reads with a couple of people while I read this book, and I feel like that really added to the experience. But just to kind of explain what Sakyo Girls is about. A girl, her sister, and her mom moved to Sakyo Island, which is along the lines of atmospheric in the way the Wicked Deep was. I really liked the cold, kind of rainy atmosphere. Like it's the perfect atmosphere essentially for magic. But what Sakyo Girls follows is they move there, and her sister becomes friends with a super popular girl, and then she winds up dead. Well, you know she's dead, but essentially she's just missing. And there are other people in the town who they kind of know what's going on. There's a lot of unspoken things in this. Like they know sort of that they're, you know, girls go missing and what's happening and why. And there's like this being that they are essentially feeding. And you kind of get that also from the dust jacket of the book. But what I really, really loved about this book is the themes behind it. There is ace rep, there is bi rep, there are, you know, the author really hones in on what it means to be a woman. And I feel like it's a great representation to how women should be in this day and age, like building each other up, not breaking each other down, holding each other accountable for shitty things that they have done, but learning forgiveness and learning boundaries and learning when it's okay to forgive somebody, but not necessarily want them in your life, or, you know, to kind of hold them at arm's length until they kind of learn and prove themselves. It teaches so many great ideas, and it really empowers you as a woman. Like there is a group of men that kind of run things, and it's sort of like not a men versus women kind of thing, but it's a great representation of how it truly is to be a woman in this day and age. Like I have a lot of men friends who say, oh, it's not like that. And I'm like, but you can't say it's not like that because you have a dick. Like you don't you're not a woman and you don't deal with the things that women deal with. But I liked that aspect, just finding your power just as a woman and then finding your power with other women. I love this. I've recommended this to strangers. Like I've had people be like, oh, you read, like you're reading, what's a good book to read? I have, you know, a kid that wants to read a book, you know, a little girl or a little boy. And I always recommend this book because the themes in it are so wonderful. This book blew me away. I think I gave it 5 stars because that's how much I loved it. It was a book that I wasn't expecting to love, and I think that made me love it even more. I love the atmosphere, I love the themes, I love the story. I thought it was very magical in more ways than one, and in ways that I think were really important to me and would be really important to other people. The next book I read that I really, really liked was Kill Creek. I inhaled this book. This book, you guys have heard me talk about, is written in different parts. So the first part of the book is kind of the main overall story, which is there are 4 different horror authors that are from very different genres. There's like the Stephen King of the group, the YA Christian author of the group, the indie author, and then like the kind of like, who do you want to say? Like, you know, just like the, what's a good, see, this is how not into horror I've been recently. The mainstream, but not quite too mainstream author, you know what I mean? And I really like the story because essentially what happens is what you think the basis of the book is that these 4 authors go to stay in an incredibly haunted house. It's like touted as like a haunted house, and they are going to be interviewed and filmed for an interview with this horror website. And you think that's what the book's gonna be about, and you think they're just gonna be in this house and it's gonna be haunted and bad things are gonna happen. But then they leave and you're like, wait, what? Like in the second part, they're like back home and they're all writing this book and they're simultaneously writing the same book. And the threads that run through this book, you guys, are amazing. The characters are well developed and built. And the thing that I think really blew me away about this book is this is written by somebody who used to work for Disney. I'm just gonna go ahead and say the last part of this book, you would not assume somebody from Disney wrote. It is bloody and gory and horrifying and beautiful all at the same time. If you are into horror and you have not read this book, I would recommend it. It is a little bit lengthy in that way because it does jump, but I didn't struggle with the jumps. I feel like they tied together in a very good way, and I liked the ending of the book. I'm wondering if there's gonna be a second one, probably not, but it was just really, like, you wanted to know what was happening. It's one of those books where the suspense kind of gets to you because you're waiting for something really creepy to happen, and then it doesn't, and then you're like, wait, what? And then something kind of creepy happens, and you're like, wait, is it gonna get really creepy now? But it doesn't. It's definitely a book that I feel like if you're not into like the jump scares, the spooky, that kind of thing, you really like it because it's not in your face horror, except for the last like 50 pages or so. But I truly love this. I think I gave it 5 stars. The next book I read this year that I really liked was Pet Sematary. I'm not gonna stay here for long because I feel like a lot of people at this point have probably read Pet Sematary. Like it's so old that they're redoing the movie, which I'm actually kind of upset about. I'll still see it, but I'm still kind of upset about it. But this book really blew me away because, once again, Stephen King is my favorite author of all time. I own literally, like, I have an entire shelf of Stephen King stuff right here. This off camera shelf right here is all Stephen King from top to bottom. And this book is one of those books that I was really afraid to read because I was afraid I wouldn't like it, and I ended up giving it 5 stars. I feel like it was phenomenal. The characters, the character development, I realize now from this year how important characters are to me. And just the plot itself, I'm not gonna give too much away in case maybe you haven't read it or seen the movie, but the ending, oh my God, just the fact that essentially the overall story, a family moves to a small town and they have basically an Indian burial ground behind their house. And a lot of kids go to bury their animals in the far back of the pet cemetery, and that's where they are able to come back to life. And there's like stories within the town, but obviously, if you guys don't know, a human comes back to life because someone buries a human back there. And it's just from the mind of Stephen King, my God. I saw the movie when I was really little, and I'm not gonna go into that story again, but basically I was absolutely traumatized. So the history that I have with this book, I am so pleasantly surprised and happy that I loved it as much as I did. That's all I'm gonna say about Pet Sematary, because you should read it if you haven't read it, and if you have read it, you don't wanna sit here and listen to me talk about it for 15 minutes. The next book I read that I really, really loved would be The Bear and the Nightingale. The Bear and the Nightingale follows our main character and her journey with her dad remarries, and they live in a small like village essentially, and there are little gods that protect like the home and the hearth and, you know, the animals, and like they're their farms and stuff like that. And it's just very magical, but there's more to it. There's actually a god of war and a god of death, and she kind of gets wrapped up in both of those. But what I loved that Catherine did with this book is the characters in this are phenomenal. Like, the writing is very poetic and beautiful, but it's definitely a poetic and beautiful that I can get behind, that I really like. I love the setting. I love the world. I wouldn't say it's the most developed, but it is one of the most beautiful worlds I've ever read. It reminds me a lot of Lion, Witch, and the Wardrobe when they first go through the wardrobe, and it's very like wintry white. That is the vibe that you get from this book. Like, cuddle up with a blanket when you read this, because it is so well written about the like world itself that you can kind of start to feel a little bit cold. Like, it's a very wintry read, but I loved the overall story and I adore the characters so much. There's so much depth to this. I have actually read the second one. I have the third one pre-ordered. I am ready. I have actually purchased The Girl in the Tower, the second one, twice. I bought it on Kindle the day that I finished Bear and the Nightingale and read it that day, and then I bought it in hardcover to own, because this is definitely a series that I would recommend to people. It's a series that I would let people borrow. It's a series that I want to read again. It is just phenomenal. Like, Catherine knocked it out of the park with this series. Now, the last two books that I have on here are the top two books that I read of 2018, and I sat down and was really trying to decide which one of these would be my absolute favorite, but I could not decide between the two. So I'm going to talk about one first, but that doesn't mean I liked it more than the second one that I talk about. The first one that I want to talk about, you guys will not be surprised about at all, would be A Big Ship at the Edge of the Universe. I adore this series. I love the characters. I love the magic system in this. It's kind of fantasy mixed with sci-fi a little bit, and I really liked that. I feel like it was very different for the genre. I've not read something like that. There is a bit of magic that people are able to do, but they're also more, it's like a technological kind of magic. I like the villains in this series. I loved all of it. Essentially what it follows is Nyla is a race car driver essentially in the future, and she is driving in a race one day, and this woman called Mother essentially stops time. So Nyla is present and aware of what is happening, and she sees this happen, but the race car driver in front of her, Mother, speaks to him and then essentially rips him out of his car and kills him. And that's how the book starts. And I read that going to bed one night and was like, wait, what? And like had to go to bed because I had to go to work, and I inhaled the book in like the entire weekend. That's all I read, because the story from there, she meets a woman named Boots, and Boots is probably my favorite character in a series ever. And funny enough, she actually reminds me of my friend Bunny. And now when I think of Boots, I just picture Bunny like all the time. If you guys are familiar with like our YouTube comments and stuff, Bunny is an active member of our community, and probably my favorite thing that I have received in 2018 would be Bunny. But I just loved like the characters and their relationships. But Boots is like a washed up treasure hunter, and essentially what happens is she is hunting something for like a TV show, and the TV show goes under and she gets kind of like swept under the rug, and basically she gets screwed over. And she used to be in the army, and she was in a war where essentially an entire planet of their people are wiped out. Now the people who did the wiping out actually come back in this series, and her old crew come back to get her, essentially hold her hostage to have her help them find this mythical item that they are using, that they're trying to use to kind of stop this from happening. And it's just like the characters, the world, the story, the humor, the fighting, the general badassery all goes together so well. I'm not gonna stay here for much longer though, because I did an entire reading vlog. I will link it up above for you guys. I have a full review. I adore Alex. I adore their writing. I adore their series. It's just top 3 favorite series of all time. I would definitely say is this one. I know the third one's not even out yet, but I don't even care. Like, I know that I am absolutely mad, head over heels in love with these characters and with this series. And the last book that I want to talk about is a book that I read very early on in the year. I think I read it in February. It was a NetGalley ARC that I received, and I immediately after finishing it pre-ordered it. And that would be Neanderthal Opens the Door to the Universe. This is a contemporary, and to say that one of my top 2 favorite books of the year, one is sci-fi and the other one is contemporary, is crazy to me. 2 genres that I did not think that I would ever truly fall in love with, and yet here we are. Neanderthal Opens the Door to the Universe follows our Neanderthal, that's what people call him. His name is Clay, and he is bullied and picked on, and his brother has killed himself, and he's left at home with shit parents and a shit life. And he, there's this bully at school, and the bully really, him and his friends really go in on our Neanderthal. And what happens is the bully ends up getting a concussion. He's like out boating and he falls off the boat. He's like swimming and somebody hits him with his boat and he's in a concussion. Well, he wakes up and decides he's got a message from God. He had a vision from God and he needs Neanderthal's help to kind of make it happen. And essentially the book just follows them trying to make their school and make their lives a better place. But what really ends up happening is they end up making their lives better and their friendship better. And it's just so beautiful and it's so funny, you guys. It is so fucking funny. I was at work and I read the first like 150 pages when I was at work because I got approved for Nightingale. It was the first time I'd ever gotten approved and I was so hyped about it. And I was like, I'm gonna read this right now. So I downloaded it and just inhaled as much as I possibly could before I needed to go to bed. And I was dying. Like I was dying laughing so hard that I was crying, like actual tears down my face crying. Coworkers wondering if I was okay, like what was wrong, like is she losing her mind kind of thing. And it's just that good of a book. Like I just truly loved it that much. And like I said, it's feel good and it's contemporary, but it has like the suicide theme running through it and like the feeling kind of lost in where you fit and finding your crowd. And it's beautiful. And I have recommended this book to so many people and I've gotten so much great feedback from people that have read it, and I'll list all these books down below so you guys can check them out. But if I could choose 2 books that you read this year, it would be A Big Ship at the Edge of the Universe and Neanderthal Opens the Door to the Universe, because they're just both phenomenal books and I could not choose between the 2 of them between my top favorite book of 2018. All right, guys, so that is it for this video. This video is going to be over 20 minutes long, so I think I need to get off of here. But those are the books that I loved in 2018. I will list every single one of them down below. You can find my reviews on Goodreads. I'm gonna list Goodreads links from Goodreads if you wanna get any of these. You can actually just go right under the book and you can see like buy on Amazon, which I would not recommend. If you can, I would go buy these at Barnes & Noble or like a standalone bookstore, like an indie bookstore if you have one by your house. If you go to a bookstore and they don't have the book, you can request them to buy the book. And I feel like that's awesome because it helps them and it helps you. You just have to wait a little bit to get it, but that is all the books that I just could not get enough of in 2018 and would definitely recommend and cannot wait to reread. But I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Let me know down below your favorite book or your top 3 if you can't choose books of 2018. But I love you guys so much and I will see you guys in the next video. Bye.